Welcome to the Real Python Podcast. This is episode 130. Does your company have a plan for growing an internal Python community? What are the attributes to look for when bringing someone new into your department? This week on the show, Pablo Galindo Salgado returns to talk about the Python Guild within Bloomberg and managing the release of Python 3.11. Pablo describes how the Python Guild started and currently operates inside Bloomberg. We talk about how it fosters community and acts as a way to promote internally developed tools with disparate teams. We also discuss how workgroups use it to find new internal candidates for their teams. Pablo talks about his role as release manager for Python 3.10 and 3.11. He shares the intense journey the team has had this year preparing for the release of 3.11. He details updating testing strategies to work with the new specializing adaptive interpreter. This episode is sponsored by Platform.sh. Discover an alternative to DIY for your web fleet and all the stacks it contains on a single stable platform. Find us at platform.sh. All right, let's get started. The Real Python Podcast is a weekly conversation about using Python in the real world. My name is Christopher Bailey, your host. Each week, we feature interviews with experts in the community and discussions about the topics, articles, and courses found at realpython.com. After the podcast, join us and learn real-world Python skills with a community of experts at realpython.com. Hey, Pablo, welcome back on the show.
Hey, thank you very much for inviting me again. It's a pleasure to be here, as always.
It's awesome. We were just recently talking about MEMRE, and I had a whole bunch of additional questions I wanted to ask you, and then instead of making it like a 2-hour episode.
Right. I don't know if people will survive that.
Yeah, I thought maybe we could break it apart a little bit. And so one of the things I wanted to ask about that actually came up in this Bloomberg blog post that was about MEMRE, there was a mentioning of an internal, what was called a Python Guild inside of Bloomberg. And then I thought that was really fascinating. And maybe you could tell me a little bit about that. And is it still going on?
Yeah, it is. Actually, it's kind of part of a bigger program that we have called the Guild program. So the idea here is that when you have like a big company, I mean, we are not as big as maybe Google or Amazon or Microsoft, but we are quite big. Like we have a thing at this time around 8,000 developers and even more people in other departments.
Right.
And what happened here is that, you have big departments, like, and most of the biggest, like, more broader distinction is that you have what is called the people that do infrastructure, so software infrastructure, and then you have people that develop for actual clients and, do things that people are actually going to use. That is normally called application developers.
Okay.
And what happens when you have a big enough company is that these two groups start to not communicate a lot between themselves. So what happens is that maybe the people doing infrastructure are starting to do tools and things like that maybe they are a bit not aligned with the things that the people in application actually need. And the other way around, maybe what happens is that I'm going to say we because I'm in software infrastructure, but the software infrastructure people, they develop a bunch of solutions that actually could help the people in application, but they don't know about them.
Right. You got to sort of evangelize them to them.
Right. And it's quite hard, man. Like, this is surprisingly complicated problem because when you are like such a big company, and especially Bloomberg, is kind of, I suppose it's not that rare, but like Bloomberg is a bit like a lot of little startups together, because what happens is that every single team in the company is kind of free to do whatever they want. So we have common infrastructure, and we have common tools. Like many big companies, we even have our own version of the C++ libraries and things like that. So the C++ standard libraries, like I think every single big company has this for whatever reason. But like what happens is that every team can do whatever they want. They can use the provided tools if they think they are good enough or if they want an easy integrated experience. But if they think they know better or they want to develop a bespoke solution for whatever, they are free to do so. They can choose their code style. They can choose to use or not the tools. It's just that if they don't choose the tools that the infrastructure provides, they are on their own. They are, they need to support whatever they do. Yeah, and in that regard, they can use whatever languages they would like. We don't support Rust in the sense that we don't have a team in software infrastructure that cares about Rust.
Right.
But people can do Rust if they want. People have using every single language. Like, so we have coding, Camel, Haskell. It's just that if you use one of these languages, then you're a bit on your own. So we have this situation when, like, teams are super different from one another. So communicating these changes, like, okay, we did this tool, or we have this solution, or we would like you to use this thing, is very, very hard. That evangelization that you mentioned, it turns out that it was a very hard problem. And moving knowledge from the infrastructure teams to the application teams, it was a hard problem, right? Because, like, knowledge was not being moved. People were, like, not using the solutions that a lot of people are paying a lot of money to develop.
Right.
So what happened is that they say, okay, we are going to create this thing called the champs program. And that was kind of a bit of how the guilds started, or one of the versions. And the idea here is that there is, like, representatives between infrastructure teams that will communicate these changes to a bunch of people that are the champs. And the champs are basically people from different teams in application teams that will represent the teams themselves. So that's the way the communication went. So these representatives go to these meetings when we talk about everything that is new, or changes, or things that we are going to remove. And the idea is that they will tell the teams, right? And that worked really, really well. So at that time, they started to work really, really well. But also we start seeing that there was this kind of also sense of community there, right? So it was a bit abstract, but we saw that maybe there was a third kind of actor in this model. So it was not only infrastructure people and application people, but it was kind of missing something that this kind of chance program was hinting, which is the community factor. And the idea here is that, maybe all these people doing all these other things, like, Rust and C++ or Python or whatever, maybe they can actually, talk in a way that is not just the things that infrastructure wants and the things that the teams need and whatnot. Maybe there is also, like, things outside that scope, and, like, people can talk about that. So maybe there is talks about, okay, so should you do test driven development, or should you use PyTest, right? So for instance, from infrastructure, we don't force you to use PyTest, so we are not going to write anything about PyTest, because you can do whatever. We don't have anything to say about that. But maybe there is a lot of people inside the company that think, oh, actually, this is a very important thing, and we should talk about PyTest more, and we would like everyone in Bloomberg to do it, but not in a formal infrastructure versus application kind of way. So the idea of the guild program that started long ago is that guilds are basically these groups of people that will talk about a given domain. So for instance, at Bloomberg right now, we have a lot of them. There is the Python guild, but there is also the testing guild, there is the infrastructure guild, and there is the machine learning guild, and a bunch of others, right? And the idea here is that these guilds kind of gather together all the people that care about a specific topic. So for instance, Python, but talk about all the community things. So it's not about, like, what is supported and what is not supported and things like that. It's about, like, how we would like to use Python in the company, and that will take into account every single thing, like how we think we should do testing. So it's very similar to, like, an open source community, but inside the company. And it feels like that, actually, because the conversations are all the place, and it's not just centered on, like, oh, we support this, we don't support this, or we are going to develop this or not. Like, for instance, and the guild is not only about discussing, it's also about, like, doing tools. So for instance, sometimes there is people saying, okay, yeah, we have this tool that infrastructure is providing us. So we have a bunch of middleware tools.
Sure.
And it will be super cool to have something like it will automatically generate types for this, right? If you want to type annotate your code, it will automatically generate types once you give the schema for a given middleware, right? So from infrastructure, we say, we don't really care about that. We are not going to generate this. We are not interested to support that, but it's fine. But maybe the guild says, oh, actually, there's a lot of people that want this, so let's coordinate all of us to create what is called, in kind of fancy words, an inner source repo. So it's a repo that is not owned by any team in particular; it's owned by everyone together.
Huh.
And let's develop together this solution. And actually, what happened is that a lot of people want that, and not only start using it, but also start developing from different teams. So you have now this weird model, which was new at the time, when a lot of people are actually, developing code in a way that is not just centered on the specific needs of that team, and is developed from many different teams with many different reasons. It's like open source, but inside the company.
Yeah, sounds super collaborative and in kind of a neat way that people can ask specific questions, and it's like kind of a different methodology of it would be people at all these different skill levels, but they're all have a common goal inside this main company. That's neat.
Right, and the interesting thing about this thing here as well is that it's not only about code. It's like, for instance, the guild members go to conferences. Like there's a lot of people that go to PyCon or EuroPython and things like that, and then they came back and they will talk to everyone about like what they saw in those conferences. And we have, for instance, mentoring as well. Like there is people that want to say, "Oh, I want to, I want to learn more about Python, and I want to get involved a bit more on how Python is made at Bloomberg." And there is like a mentoring program when people teach you about things and you work together with people that are more experienced than you. And I think this is key because going a bit deeper on kind of big company culture, like one of the things that is important is like, how do you grow technically on your role? Specifically, you don't want to jump into a management role, right? So how do you grow if you are in a technical path? So a lot of companies have this idea of so you are now like I don't know, different companies have different names for things, right? Like fellow engineer or like the staff engineer and whatever.
Yeah,
What happens normally is that the higher you go in these technical ladders, kind of you need to have impact, like bigger scope of impact. So at the beginning, maybe it's only your team, but then it's your team and your department, and then it's the whole company, and then it's like the company and also outside the company. So you are giving a good name to the company, and what happens is that locating these opportunities to have impact outside your team is actually not that easy, because at the end of the day, you are paid to do your job, and your job normally happens within your team.
right.
So it's quite difficult to say, okay, so how can I do my job and actually do something that has also impact outside my team. Not only is hard to locate those opportunities, but also it's hard to do it in your time. Like it feels like you need to work even more hours to do that, right? So that we don't like that. So the guild program, what allows people as well is to spend company time. So it's not like you need to work more. It's actually part of your normal work hours once you are part of the guild. Normally it's like 20% of your time or something like that. So you can use that time to work on these community programs, so to develop these common tools. And this is very cool because these tools are used by the whole company. So this is a very good way to have an impact that is outside your team. So it allows you to do this technical growth. Not only that, but also it will allow you to work very close together with people that are not in your team. So not only you can, at the end of the day, in your team there will be like super cool engineers, but this will allow you to work with more people and more focus on what you like. Maybe your team does a bit of Python, or but not all the Python that you would like, and there is no Python experts on your team. So you will say, oh, I cannot grow as much as I wanted because my team does Python, but it's not the I don't know, hardcore Python that I would like to know. Or
Yeah, I was thinking about like somebody who's doing data visualizations for reports or something like that. And obviously, there's going to be different people
right,
that were just using Excel. Like we talk about that often on the show.
right.
And they're like, I would like to, automate some of the things I do and, get into like reporting in that way. I could see somebody like that saying, I've heard about this thing called Python. And is that a common like potential member of the guild?
Absolutely, yeah. There is a whole department at Bloomberg that are people that use Excel. This is called it's not engineering; it's called global data.
Okay.
So it's people that they do a lot of Jupyter, but most people started doing just Excel, and I'm sure they still do a lot of Excel. And they're actually outside engineering, but they have a lot of engineering needs because at the end of the day, they have a lot of Python questions that people that are doing software engineering also have. So these people actually are also very good candidates for the guild because they can learn about all these Python things, but also they can contact people that are at the same level as them, but a higher level as them. And the idea is that you will put together people with the same interests but different levels. So there is a lot of cross pollination. So it's not about only learning from people that can teach you different things. But it's also about like knowing, expanding your network, but also kind of learning about other things that people are doing. Maybe you start, collaborating with someone on this tool that you like, but then you like to work with them, and then you're interested to say, okay, what this person does, and it turns out that you're interested now on their team, and then you say, oh, maybe I want to join their team in the future. And that is good, right? Because like,
yeah, that's good inside of an organization.
exactly, because many people will say, oh man, I hate my team, or my manager is not good, or whatever, right? You may not be happy. Many people think about, oh, I will leave the company, right? Because like, I don't know, I'm not happy here. And that is not in the, I mean, it's a good option. I'm not saying that it's a bad option by any means.
Right.
It has advantages, but
it's potentially really bad for the company, though. I mean, like,
well, for the company, it's a bad thing,
yeah,
especially if you spend a lot of time,
just the onboarding, the hiring,
exactly,
everything.
And in general, especially there's a lot of knowledge loss and network loss. So for the company, it's a bad thing. And in general, for a lot of people, leaving may be a good thing, but for a lot of people, leaving may not be that a good decision, right? Because you may think that you are like, every time you join a new team is a bit of a gamble, because sure, you're running away from this problem, but nobody is telling you that that problem is not going to be in the next place, right?
Sure.
So at the end of the day, moving inside the company is not like the final solution or the silver bullet, but it has advantages because you can know exactly how the team works before joining it, which you cannot do normally from outside,
Yeah,
or
that's
at
true.
least not to the same extent. So in this case, it's a good way to allow people to work together with other people and learn what they are doing. So you can say, okay, maybe you are not happy in your team, so join this team. And actually, for instance, as an example, Python infrastructure, which is the team I work on, most of the people that are in the team actually came from the guild. Because what happened is that we started the team, I think, 4 years or 5 years ago at Bloomberg. It's kind of a weird team because we have people in San Francisco and London, and New York is one of the first fully distributed teams that the company has, in the sense that we all work on the same things, but we are across locations.
Hey, you're really distributed.
Yeah, it was a bit of an experiment. I think a successful one. Well, I would like to say that, to think that it's a successful one.
Yeah.
But and what happened is that we started to kind of hire people from the guild, because we saw these individuals that were super excited about Python and were helping the community. So there is people that, for instance, in the internal chats, they were solving questions for people, right? And then we saw, wow, this person knows a lot of Python. They really like Python. We are like-minded. We think that maybe we want to give them the opportunity to have a bigger impact and work on the actual hard problems, not only on the community side, but also like to drive literally the language inside. So most of the people that we have in the team have been either in the guild or leaders of the guild, or different positions. We can go into detail about like how the guild is structured inside, but one of the things that I want to finish on this particular topic is that it's also a very good way to highlight people inside the company, right? Like,
Yeah.
Sometimes it sounds a bit silly, but for instance, sometimes we have been hiring and then we say, okay, we want someone who is very good at Python, but who also kind of has these other qualities that our team has. How can we find them? And sometimes it's very hard in a big company, because like you don't, maybe you are biased towards the people that is bad, or you're missing a lot of people because you need to be conscious not only about the bias that you have because of who you are and how you think, but also the network bias. Like, okay, so you only consider people that you know, but in a big company that may be a big error. So these guilds are super great because they will highlight a lot of individuals that otherwise will not have been put in the spotlight enough. It will give a lot of opportunities for people to be noticed, to move to teams that are closer to the things that they like.
Platform.sh provides the cloud-based solution you need, which allows you to manage, update, and optimize your website and/or online application fleet with our secure, unified, enterprise-grade platform. Designed for effective building, running, and scaling of web applications, we are the leader in web fleet management. Are you ready to join the Platform.sh community and optimize your fleet operations? There's no time like the present. Find us at platform.sh. One of the things I think about with that is a common refrain that I kind of see often is the culture for, computer science generally is like, oh my God, you gotta like prepare for interviews and so forth, and you have to like know that they're going to ask you all these specific things and so forth. And I don't know, like, yes, there are positions that are very much like that, and yes, you need to know what you want, but often things happen internally inside of an organization. But in order for that to happen, it would be nice to like know the people that are eager to learn, that are interested in learning new things, that are passionate in like improving their skills. And someone who seeks out something like that, they see, oh, hey, there's this thing called the Python Guild, and I've heard about Python, I want to learn more about it. They join it, you see the spark in them. That's like such an immediate thing. Like, oh my gosh, this person can do this thing, is interested in it, and they don't, maybe that, they don't have all the skills, but they're at least interested in learning them.
Well, and that I cannot put enough emphasis on how important that is. Like,
Yeah.
I think
Eagerness.
right? No,
You know?
indeed. It's such an important resource. I think a lot of people. I mean, I talk with a lot of people, and in the C Python team and in Bloomberg, I mentor a lot of people that want to be, in the C Python team, that they want to eventually be core developers. A bunch of the new core developers has been people that I have been mentoring over these years. I mean, not exclusively,
Yeah,
but
sure.
I have a bunch of pins there, and at Bloomberg the same. And one of the topics that happen a lot in these conversations with the mentees is that there is this idea of like they elevate certain people to incredible, like, pedestals when they say, wow, these persons are super smart, I wish I could be as smart as these people, right?
Right.
And what happened is that because maybe they admire them, or maybe these people have created something that is very popular, and they think that is, oh, this is a genius, I will hope I could create this, right? And the reality of the situation is that none of these people like really are special in any way, right? Like, okay, they are very talented people and like very smart people, but this is not something that, okay, you are talented and smart. Actually, what happened is that these people have put a lot of effort on learning the things and skills, and have submerged themselves into the topics in such a way and with enough passion that they have reached these levels. And also there is a bunch of luck involved. That is also important to understand.
Right. Timing, all that stuff. Yeah.
But the most important thing here, and what will put you in those positions that you want to be if you admire these people faster, is the eagerness to learn.
Yeah.
Right? And the excitement. Like, this is such an important thing, like in open source and in companies. And in companies, I will say it's even more important. Like, I will prefer 1 million times a person who like knows almost nothing about Python, but is eager to learn, is excited, it absorbs information fast. He kind of like knows what he wants to do, and like brings this energy to learning and to the job, that a person that is as super expert, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like a meh, because yeah, it's important.
How do you steer that person? It's like, it's so
Yeah, and
frustrating.
also
Yeah.
this I mean, this happens to me a lot. I'm a very energetic person. Even, I mean, I'm quite introvert in real life, but like when I'm across people that I'm comfortable with, I'm very energetic, right?
Yeah.
Man, sometimes I'm like, for instance, we come from this episode talking about membrane. So when I had the first prototype about membrane, I came to one of our meetings that we have, and I was like super excited about this, right? And I was, wow, look at this. And at the time, it was just a prototype. We just printing a bunch of things, and it was objectively not that cool. I mean,
Right.
maybe if you are very into memory profilers, you will say that it was cool, but like, it's not the kind of thing that you will show to your friend and he will say,
Yeah.
wow, man, this is awesome. They will say, okay.
Yeah,
But
it's like music, like the same thing. Like, if you know another guitarist and you trust them at a certain level, and you like can play them like a couple parts of a song, it's like something that if you were to play it to your family, they're going to be like, Okay.
Exactly, right. Like,
You're like, no, this thing is so cool.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a very good comparison, actually. So one thing that happened is that people in my team were super excited about that, and they reacted like, these videos when some of them are staged, actually, but like some of the videos when magicians go to the street and they do street magic, and people like are crazy, right? They say, "How did you do that?" They start running, right, and they're like shouting. So
Right.
maybe some of them are fake, but like some of them are genuine. So like that, right? Like when people react like that and say, "Wow, this is awesome," and this gives you like the energy that this will give you, like when people in your team or people in your company or whatever, not only recognize your work, but they are excited about what you do.
Yeah.
And not exactly what you do, but also you could be excited about what they do, or excited about a project, or excited about an idea, or to learn something. Like that thing is such an important resource. Like really, I cannot put enough emphasis. If someone is listening to us and they say, "Oh, look, I know a bit of Python, but like, I'm not like X or Y, or like, how can I,
Right.
what can I do to learn more?" So there's a bunch of things that you can do, like find people that you enjoy and you like, and find topics that you enjoy. But like, especially if you're joining teams or you're starting to work together, like bringing energy to the thing is such an important thing, and especially with juniors and people that are starting in companies, and to start working with people at companies, like bringing energy to and to the team is probably more important than bringing technical expertise, because we have a lot of people that join companies think like being super confident, and they are super smart people, and that is super useful. Like
Yeah.
and companies are not going to say no to that, but those people actually don't tend to be as successful by whatever metrics you like normally as people that maybe they started knowing much less, but they are super enthusiastic and they are super eager to learn. Because myself included, when I was younger, one of the things that happen is that it's very easy to be, I wouldn't say arrogant, but like a bit less. When you think that you know a lot, is much harder to absorb information, because if you need to absorb a lot of information, implicitly you need to admit that you don't know it that much, right? So, and that is very difficult to admit if your kind of persona is, "Oh, I know
Yeah.
a lot of Python,"
It's
right?
the cup is full already kind of thing. It's like,
Exactly. So,
where's that knowledge going to go? It's just going to end up on the floor.
exactly, and it kind of, especially when you are young, it gives you a lot of insecurity, because if people in general like to see you as the Python expert, it kind of like put you in a position when you are the expert, and it's very uncomfortable to say, "Oh, I don't know this," right? But then you're missing so many things, and so many, like I love, man, I not only love to be wrong. I mean, on cases that it doesn't matter, obviously, if I
Right.
if it's going to cost my company a lot of money, that is not the best place. But like, I love to be wrong on things that I'm very confident about, because this means that there is aspects of the things that I like and love and have spent a lot of time working, that I'm going to learn. I didn't knew, and that is such a great experience. Like my background is physics and mathematics, and one of the biggest, like the sensations that I love the most in life is when a concept, a mathematical or physical concept, clicks in your mind, right? Like you struggle a bit with something. It could be anything. It could be, I don't know, the dual vector space, or like the way the guitar interface work, and like high impedance or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And when it clicks, when you finally understand the thing, like it's like it's such a beautiful sensation. Like I love it, and this happens in computer science in less, maybe not that obviously, or to a less extent, but it happens as well when you are debugging something and you say, "This is impossible. This thing cannot happen," and it's happening, right? And when you finally understand what is going on, and then you can incorporate that extra knowledge to your pool of knowledge, that is such an incredible sensation. And if you approach problems from this kind of point of view, when you say, "I'm an expert," right? Like you're missing so many things. So
Yeah.
that will be my best advice. If you are joining a new company, or you are thinking about like learning more Python, be enthusiastic, be super open to learn, and be hungry to learn. Like that, go closer to the people that know, and just absorb as much as you can. Don't put those people in a pedestal, because at the end of the day, teachers are good because they can teach you things in a way that you can understand, not because they know a lot, right? Like, and that is the important distinction. So that would be my biggest advice, and this is the thing that I think is more valuable for everyone in teams, to be enthusiastic, even if you're not a junior.
Yeah, I was just really impressed by that whole thing. Was intrigued by it, and it wasn't exactly what I thought it was. I thought everything was going to be a little more like a user group or a meetup, but it sounds like a much more interesting kind of structural thing that you've built inside there.
It holds also meetups, right? Like, for instance, we do meetups, we do conferences. There is the structure that we have is that, especially now, we have been through a bunch of cycles over how to organize it. We started being like a member organization when you either are in the guild or you are not in the guild, and we have these trials when you could enter the guild if you are good enough. That we abandoned that.
Okay.
Quick enough, I think, because not only that felt a bit, I'm missing a word here, but a bit weird, right?
Exclusionary,
like the exclusive club, and like we, it was a bit weird because like we had even this, which I think it was always false, but nobody, it's the kind of thing that nobody really knows, or people just repeat and then think they are correct. So people thought that when you do your year evaluation at Bloomberg, there was a checkbox that managers could see that says this person is in the guild, and that triggers things. That was always false, but that was for whatever reason people believe that. So it felt like this exclusive club that even affects your evaluation, right? It was so weird.
Okay.
So we abandoned that. No, I mean, it bootstrapped the thing, so don't get me wrong, it started to be okay. But now we have moved to this other model when instead of having these kind of, members and whatnot, our idea is that everyone is in the guild, like for that reason, like there is no members of the guild. What we have right now is called, I don't know the terminology right now, but I think we have domain it's group leaders, work group leaders, that is. So we have different work groups. For instance, I'm in the teaching work group and the education work group, or whatever it's called. But there is also, for instance, the conference work group, and then there is also the testing work group within the Python guild, and there is also, for instance, the internal tools and the migrations work group. So there is people inside the guild that are interested about a specific topic, and then every single of these work group has an organizer, who is not the leader, although that's the terminology right now, but it's basically an organizer, and they are in charge of basically making the meetings happen, and kind of organizing a bit the work. It's not the leader per se, because it's not like telling people what to do. It's just like the person who, and sometimes there are 2 or more organizers per work group, and then there is kind of the person organizing all the work groups that is called the chair.
Okay.
I think that's our current terminology. And that person basically, for instance, he does a bunch of things that are administrative of the whole group. So for example, for the people that have contributed in different ways to the guild, either by code or by documentation or by organizing meetings or organizing topics. For instance, there is a group talking about Python peps. So they select every week a Python pep that not necessarily one of the new ones, it may be one of the old ones, and they do kind of like a journal discussion about that. So they talk about it. Yeah. So for instance, the chair, what it does is that all the people that have contributed to the guild in any way, they send an email at the end of the year to their managers to say, this person has done this thing and it's very good because blah blah blah. So this is something that the chair does, because it's kind of helping the whole structure.
Yeah.
And this has worked super well, because this leads a lot of people to self-organize, but also to like have a more close impact on the things that they really like, and to learn about, and you can jump from one of these works to others. You can be in many of them at the same time, and this, I think this has been much better than the original members only structure.
Yeah, that sounds cool. One of the other roles that you do in the Python community that's kind of a huge one is being the release manager for CPython.
Right.
I was kind of wondering how things are going, because we had some news recently of things kind of getting pushed a little bit. I had to inform my own team inside of Real Python, because we have like little things that we're planning to do, articles and so forth. I had to point them to the the most recent release candidate. I'm like, oh, actually,
right.
Yeah,
nice. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, sure. I want to make sure people are aware of it. But yeah, how's the release going? It sounds like there have been some bumps along the way over the last year.
It's been very stressful. I'm not going to lie. I'm technically the release manager for Python 3.10 and 3.11. And Gukesh before me was 3.8 and 3.9.
Mm-hmm.
And 3.10, I mean, being release manager involves a lot of time. Like, it's kind of, I've been doing also these release streams so people can see part of what it means to be a release manager. So for instance, doing a Python release is a 3-4 hour long process. Kind of, it's quite boring, but like, it's complicated. But 3.10 in comparison with 3.11 was a walk in the park. Like, it was sort of a straightforward, not really straightforward. There was a bunch of problems, and it was a long time dedicated. But man, 3.11 is being such a pain. It's been super challenging. The reason, and I don't want to be obviously disrespectful or anything, but like, the reason it's been such a pain here is because 3.11 is packing so many changes, right? Because we have more people in the core team, but also now we have the faster CPython project that Guido is leading in Microsoft, that I'm also collaborating with them, thanks to the time Bloomberg gives to me. So now we have a lot of people that are doing a lot of changes, that these people, especially the people working, I'm working part-time on this, but the people in Microsoft are working full-time on this.
Yeah. So that's like big boulders of things moving in as opposed to like smaller items.
So suddenly you have 5 or 6 core developers that are working full-time on Python, but now not only that, but they are working on fundamental parts of the interpreter, right? Like, it's not that they are improving, I don't know, the email module. They are changing the guts of the thing in such a different way to how we used to work before, right? So before, there were always performance improvement between versions, and that has been working quite nice. And core developers have been caring about performance for a long time. This is not new,
right?
But now there is a lot of people that have more time and are more focused and working together towards that, right? So now we are also a bit more aggressive with this, which means that in this release 3.11 is packing such a brutal amount of changes on such core places of the interpreter that unfortunately there is bugs, and this has been the pain for the release. So the responsibility of the release manager is technically not, apart from doing the kind of releases themselves, right? So that's one of the most important things, or one of the most time-consuming parts. But the kind of responsibility of the release manager is ensuring that the Python release is stable.
Yeah.
So when I release Python 3.11 final, I know that is as stable as possible. So I obviously I cannot promise that we'll have any bugs.
Sure.
And,
there's always going to be bug fixes after, right?
Right. And the first releases of any version is not going to be the thing that you want to run on production on day one, although you can. For instance, at Bloomberg, we are very happy to say that we run the last versions on day one or even before. And we have been doing that since 3.9, I think. So 3.9, 3.10, and 3.11, they are going to be available to everyone on day one. But maybe it's not the wisest thing to do, right? Because there is a bunch of things that maybe also there is no wheels available or whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the responsibilities is that, okay, as much as I can, or to the best of my abilities as a person and release manager, I can ensure that Python is as stable as possible. And that is very easy if there are not a lot of changes. but
sure.
But this is such a different thing. So for instance, we have this concept of a release blocker. A release blocker is an issue, a bug in the Python bug tracker that it blocks a release. This means that the release manager cannot release if that issue is not fixed.
It's like the cord they would pull in the Japanese factories.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
we cannot move forward. Everything's stopping.
Exactly. And the problem is that there has been so many of these. There has been when, like, let's say for instance, I have to do a release on Wednesday. So I have to put the release 1 or 2 weeks delayed just because one after the other, one of these big problems. And these problems are big problems. It's things that, Python just seg faults, or it just breaks if you add 2 numbers. Or it's never adding 2 numbers. That would be too easy. But, it's always like weird conditions, like, you run a profile function, but then you do something. But like, there has been like, and the thing is so complicated. So for instance, to tell you about how complex these issues can be, one of the things Python 3.11 does is that it does this adaptive interpreter thing. And the thing this is doing is basically that, for instance, let's imagine that you have a function that adds two numbers, right?
Sure.
So the first time you run the function, the actual code that Python is going to do is that you're going to pass two Python objects, and it's going to grab the first Python object and to say what is this? Oh, it's an integer. Okay, it's an integer. What is this? Oh, okay, it's another integer. I need to add them. Okay, so I need to look for the function that adds integer. Okay, it's here, and now I need to run it. Okay, I need to execute all this code. Oh, and the result is another integer. Okay, I need to create another Python object. So it's kind of like, it's very slow, because it doesn't know what you're going to pass. Instead of two integers, now you can suddenly pass two floats, or one float and one integer, or two classes. I don't know. You can add many things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in Python 3.11, what we do is that we say, okay, normally what happens is that you have a function, if you pass two integers, you'll probably keep passing integers, right? So if a function is executed enough times with the same input types, like integers in this case, instead of that generic addition, we will change the code of the function to do a special fast addition for integers. So in the bytecode, basically, instead of being generic add, the bytecode actually is called binary add, but let's call it generic add. We will change it on the fly to something called add for integers. And the thing about add for integers is that it won't ask to the left and right side, are you integers? And okay, let's find the integer thing. It will add integers. It will technically check that they are integers. So, you suddenly pass floats, you will not do a wrong thing.
Right.
But that is called guarding. But it will check very quickly if you are actually keeping passing integers, and it will just execute the addition super quickly.
Move it on a fast path as opposed to like...
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So this is called quickening. Okay, so that is quite nice, and this is the adaptive part on the adaptive interpreter, because it will adapt to the things that you're passing. It adapts in many ways. Like, for instance, if you keep accessing the same attribute, it will automatically create a specific super fast version of get attribute and things like that. Cool, that is nice. But now you have this problem. Think about it. It's quite difficult.
Get extra paths to to trace down. Yeah.
Right. Imagine that you have a bug in the fast path. This means that if you're testing the function and you're calling it only once, you will not see it, because the function only activates the fast path if you call it enough times. So this means that the test suite is not checking the fast paths of many of these things.
It needs to run a certain number of times to...
Exactly. So the only way to check that... So I mean, obviously the test suite is checking the fast path because we force it to in many cases. But what happens is that it's very easy to forget about some of the fast paths, right? Or a combination of them, right? So we do, we know about this problem, and we put a lot of effort in the test suite so the fast paths are checked. But sometimes what can happen is that we miss a combination of things. So for instance, one of the errors that people submit to us is that if you have a class that has an attribute, let's call the attribute foo, and then you have an instance of a class, right?
Okay.
If you put the attribute in the instance as well, that has preference. So it's just the rule how Python works. So if the instance has an attribute foo, you will get the attribute in the instance before the attribute in the class if they have the same name. But the bug was that if you call the function enough times, when it quickens, it will get the attribute from the class. So
oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it was crazy, because like you keep accessing the same attribute from the instance, and then when the function quickens, it will say, oh, actually the class has preference now because we made that incorrectly. And then suddenly you're getting a totally different thing.
Yeah, you're getting something not even initialized. Yeah.
Right. That was such a difficult thing to... And the person reporting this was clueless, because they were like, I don't know what's going on, but like if I run my test suite,
why they don't even know why it would even think that way. Yeah, it's like
right. What they were saying is that sometimes when the moon is full on Wednesdays, if I run my test suite, I get a failure.
When the werewolves are out.
Yeah. Because like, what is going on? And the failure was not, like, oh, you are getting class attribute instead of instance attribute. The failure was non-type doesn't have attribute blah. Because what happened is that you were getting none, but that none was then being passed through something, and that something was using something else. And at the end of the day, something expected a number and it was receiving none, and then that complaint. So it was such a difficult thing to track down, because if you say, okay, this thing is receiving none, but that is impossible because the attribute of this thing is a number, is not none.
Set, yeah.
So that is the kind of errors that we are dealing with right now, right? Or so the release is being such a complicated thing, because there is stages on the release process when I need to freeze things.
Yeah. I was thinking that normally the no new features shall pass at a certain point, right? That was what,
right, like the Gandalf style, right?
right, exactly. I've been watching the movies recently.
So this is beta free. So for instance, when we release the first beta, and so we have a bunch of alpha releases in a month, I think it's 6 of them. So after 6 alpha releases, so 6 months of development, we activate the first beta. So the first beta marks the moment where nobody can add new features, like no changes in API, no new parameters. So from that point onwards, it can only be bug fixes and documentation changes.
Okay. No, not even like the thought of optimizing things.
Just bug fixes, right?
Okay.
So that's kind of fine. That is okay, right? Like, okay, so any new features go to Python 3.12 in this case, and optimizations as well. So that is fine. But like, what happens is that there is another stage, in particular, around the first release candidate. So when we are 3 months away from the release, or 2 months. Well, now it's 3, but something like that. When we freeze something called the ABI. So the ABI stands for Application Binary Interface, and this is a fancy name to say that the shape of the functions and structures in C cannot change. So this is so if you create a binary wheel. So basically a precompiled package. So you don't need to recompile it when we do the final release, right? Because it's not going to crash.
This should be the same.
Right. But this is a bit challenging because this puts a bunch of constraints on what you can and cannot do. For instance, you cannot add new parameters to functions in C because they're public, because this means that someone calling that function will crash because they are passing less parameters, right? Like in Python, you will get a value error, well, it depends on what happened. But in Python, you will get an error that will tell you, oh, you are passing 3 parameters, but this function has 5. But in C, you will segfault. Like C is not nice about this. It will just crash, or it will fail to compile. So when this happens, it means that there is a lot of things that you cannot do. But if you have a bunch of bugs, and the solution to those bugs involves changing these functions, then it's very hard, because it means that you need to do the fix in a more complicated way because you cannot use it in the easy way. And that has a problem for the release manager, in this case me, because at that stage, I need to ensure that Python is stable. And the way to get the stability is by not changing things, right? And if for fixing a bug, you need to add 3,000 lines of code, I mean, maybe not 3,000, but let's say 200 lines of code.
Okay.
Then you're introducing kind of chaos into the system, right? Because now there is these 200 lines of code that are here that before were not here. So how can I know that those 200 lines of code are not introducing weird problems that before were not there, right?
Making something else.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, for instance, coverage, the tool, like coverage.py, that Ned Batchelder, I think, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Ned, but that Ned maintains, he suffers a lot from this because sometimes we have introduced fixes that break coverage because it makes coverage not report some lines or something like that. And he has been very diligently raising issues to CPython every time we break coverage. So thanks, Ned. You're awesome. But this is a good example. So as a release manager, I need to do this super complicated decisions in which I either need to investigate individually every single change that goes into, so I'm happy with the risk that is going to introduce, which makes me have to review everything, which is very hard because look, I'm a core developer and I know a lot about Python, but I'm not an expert on all the areas. For instance, I am not an expert on async.io, and I have to review a bunch of async.io PRs, which forced me to learn things that I have not knew enough, so I can take the decisions. Okay, we can take this, we cannot take this, and this is super time consuming, super time consuming. Involves a lot, and if this happens quite constantly, not only, this is a very interesting thing, when you have n changes, so a number of changes, right? Let's call that n. The way those n changes can interact between themselves,
right?
The formula is m times n minus 1 over 2. Is a symmetric amount of combination. It's like if you imagine a matrix, is the elements in the diagonal and above. This means that if you have n things, the combination grows quadratically.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, intuitively you can say, right? Like you have one thing, there is only one way to combine that. If you have two things, okay, there is one, and then one interacting with the other. But if you have three things, now you have one with two, 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 three, and three with one. You have four things, now is one with two, one with three, one with four, two with etc., etc., right? So introducing n things, it grows quadratically, which means that it's not linear. So it becomes super difficult very quickly. Like the complexity grows extremely fast. And this is very difficult in a release that was already challenging because the amount of things that we were introducing. Now suddenly I'm in a situation right now when I have released already release candidate 2, I think. Yes, release candidate 2, which is supposed to be just the final release. Like we are supposed to have release candidate 2, and the difference between release candidate 2 and the final release is supposed to only be documentation. Like that's it.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Right, because that's how you get stability. Like we know that this works, don't touch it. And the reason we have a bit of wiggle room is in case we discover something weird. And we already have 2 release blockers, which means that we already have 2 different problems that need to be introduced in release candidate 2 to fix things that we know they are blocked, right? So like at the end of the day, I'm quite sure that we will release Python 3.11 and it will be a great release, and hopefully it will be stable. We will discover shortly some problems because that's life.
Sure.
But it's been very challenging, especially compared to my previous experience with 3.10.
3.10 felt like a breeze.
Right.
It's funny because you changed from the parser at that time.
Yeah, man, that was I was referring to this when I was talking with Gukash and Victor Steiner and some other colleagues in the core development team, that I feel, I mean, it's a bit kind of, I suppose, incorrect that I say this because I was part of the change, the people making the change.
Right.
But man, I felt so proud of that change because it feels like changing the parser of a language as popular as Python is like doing open heart surgery, right?
Sure.
Like you need to change it as it's running, and like it's such a big piece, like, and it's just the grammar of the language. It's so easy to get it wrong. Like life actually conspires against you because it's very difficult to prove that 2 parsers do the same thing. Like there are fundamental theorems that will make that you cannot prove that, and it went almost like unnoticed. Like the amount of bugs that we have received are always like, these error messages a bit weird.
More documentation kind of things. Like,
yeah, or the position of this is a bit like off, or the AST has a location that is a bit weird. But we have never received fundamental, now this thing is wrong, right? Or like Python is doing something different now, even the smallest one. So I was feeling quite proud because that had the potential to be very wrong. Like we were a bit scared about that.
Yeah. It went well.
Yeah,
it was great.
It went well. We were lucky. Let's say it that way. I don't want to say that, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Like, yeah, I mean, they're getting their hands dirty, and that affects the whole team. Trying to like look at ways to speed things up, and those seem like really interesting problems, and that
right,
the introduction of those kinds of solutions, like who would have thought that you would have had to completely alter your testing strategy and have to develop new sort of techniques to test sort of the endurance and different stages of things. That's very interesting. Yeah.
It's hard. And oh, by the way, I want to clarify something. Like, also, I don't want to imply that I'm not the only one dealing with this. I'm super grateful that the rest of my colleagues in the core development team are helping me a lot. They react super quickly when there is problems. They review the PRs for me, so I don't need to review all of them. They are such a fantastic team to work with. I'm super lucky to have such an amazing colleagues in the core development team, and this, without them, obviously I couldn't do the release. But it's hard, but we are all pushing together, and I just want to take the time to be grateful with the full team. and all the people working with me. So I don't want to kind of leave the thing in a dramatic note. Like we in Spanish people, we are a bit dramatic. We like the drama, right? Like all the telenovelas. But I think it's also important to not finish with, wow, man, Pablo is in the is in a very dark pit. No. On the contrary,
right. There's people with you helping.
It's a bit more stressful than normal, but we are there. We are super close to have something that, I mean, we are super proud of 311. We just think that, like Victor Stinner like to say, you cannot make an omelette without breaking eggs, and sometimes dishes, and maybe also the restaurant.
Yeah.
But the omelette will be very tasty. So hopefully we will get there. Hopefully in October as planned.
Yeah. This week, I want to shine a spotlight on another Real Python video course. In fact, it's part of an entire series we've been working on for the past several months based on the Real Python book, Python Basics. This course is titled Python Basics, Strings and String Methods. It's based on another chapter of the Python Basics book by David Amos. And in the course, I'll be your instructor, and I'll take you through how to define a string literal, how to index and slice strings, working with user input, how to manipulate strings using string methods, removing whitespace from the beginning or end of a string, dealing with strings as numbers and vice versa, and you'll get an introduction to f-strings. Like all the video courses on RealPython, the course is broken into easily consumable sections. Plus, you get additional resources and code examples for the techniques shown. And in the case of many of these basic courses, you'll see additional resources, such as quizzes. And keep an eye out for even more material over the next couple of months. All of our course lessons have a transcript, including closed captions. Check out the video course. You can find a link in the show notes, or you can find it using the enhanced search tool on realpython.com. I wanted to ask you, and you've kind of already alluded to it a bunch, but I wanted to say, like, where do you find the time to do all these things? And it sounds like Bloomberg's been pretty good with helping you to be able to do some of these things, like, work on these projects, obviously being part of the infrastructure training that helped you work on memory, which we talked about last time.
Right.
But also your sort of work for core Python.
So yeah, also just to clarify, so Bloomberg gives me 50% of the time. I spend that time currently mainly to do like work on the faster C Python, but most of my open source work is outside Bloomberg, just to clarify that.
Okay.
Although I'm super grateful that Bloomberg allows me to work part-time on obviously that is a SUS.
Right. So there's a lot of additional volunteer time,
right.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit stupid because it's just giving me more work, right? And like, it's also a bit challenging when a company gives you time to work on open source, because it's not just, oh, now I have this 50% of the time. Technically, it's work time, which means that you need to report on that and,
right.
And convince your management that you're doing good work and whatever.
Do you use like a time tracking tool for that kind of stuff?
No, man, I'm a total chaos. Like, don't look at me for advice. It's just chaos. It's just chaos after chaos after chaos.
All
like, right. I don't use any organization. I have a to-do task list. I use Todoist, and I have like tasks and whatnot, but I don't organize my time. I just go with the flow. At the end of the day, I know what I need to do. Like,
sure, that's good.
I need to, for instance, for the steering council, okay, I need to fill this or research this PEP, or, and I do that. I'm quite diligent about doing things in the day. But apart from that, it's kind of like I drive my manager crazy because he wants to say, okay, so what are you going to work this week? And say, I don't know. Like, it's just, but tell me approximately. Like, I don't know, man. I'm going to tell you something. This is what I planned, but then we are on Friday and I did totally different things, or like, because we find out that,
right.
And the same thing for open source. Like, I'm a bit chaotic, to be honest.
You have to be flexible, it sounds like,
right.
For the different things you're doing. I kind of feel the same way often, and I've tried to, use schedulers and use other kinds of things, but they haven't necessarily helped me. In a lot of ways, they became
Right.
an extra task in themselves.
I think now that you mentioned this, it's important to clarify also that it's not unstructured. So it's chaotic, but it's kind of difficult to explain the difference, I assume. But it's not like I don't have any diligence. Like I'm very diligent on otherwise I couldn't be able to do things, right? Like
no, you have to be.
But
right.
I don't prepare them, like in the sense that I don't say, okay, this time I will do this and this time I will do that, and like it's just there is some emergent property that allows me to be organized in some definition of that, but it's not. It's certainly not planned or obvious from the and there is a lot of people that ask me the same question, like how I get the time. I like to joke that being a physicist, especially I specialize in general relativity. I just go fast enough that I do time dilation. So
it's the speed of light.
We have the same time, but your clock is lower, right?
Yeah, there you go. Too funny.
Yeah, I don't know. To be honest, maybe I spend too much time in Python and not enough playing the guitar. But
yeah, well, I was going to ask you, like when you were on in April.
Right.
Or was March or April, you had said one of the things you wanted to learn how to do was sweep picking.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, how's that going?
Have you had a chance to do it? Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to report that I can do it in a way that the people that I saw don't scream in pain. So now they
nice.
look at it and say, cool. So it's
nice
not, they're not impressed still by it, but yeah, I'm happy to report that it's going quite well.
Oh, good. That's awesome. Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Well, I was wondering if you have time that we can ask the weekly questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there's so much you're doing in the world of Python yourself, but what are you excited about also that's happening in the world of Python?
Well, I'm happy that Python 3.11 is going to be released in October.
Yeah.
that's what I'm happy about. But yeah, I mean, out of the joke, I'm very excited about 3.11 and to see, not only the speed, but there is a bunch of other things like better error messages and like all the reporting and
the error messages from 3.10 were amazing.
We have more of that. We have now all these cool error ranges and tracebacks and whatnot. So I'm super excited to see what people think about it and, to receive feedback and because it's a year of work that we have been collectively do. And I really cannot wait for people to play with it. So it sounds a bit cheesy, but I'm going to choose 3.11 as the answer.
That's okay. Makes sense. Yeah, cool. What's something else that you want to learn next?
More sweep picking, I suppose. No. I think one thing I want to learn more is I've been playing a lot with. I mean, this past year and a half, I've been with Rust a lot. So I already knew the language, but I started to build complicated things with Rust. I think the next thing I want to start playing is with Swift. So some friend of mine does this macOS apps and whatnot.
Okay.
And I say, okay, I want to do something totally outside what I do normally, but still in a way that I know that I have some chances to actually succeed because I try web development and I cannot do it. Like I suck.
Yeah.
All my web pages look the same and are super ugly.
All right.
So I say, okay, let me try to do some macOS apps. So now I'm starting to learn Swift.
What sort of things do you want to build?
So I don't know. I really don't have anything in mind. Like I don't have any problem that I want to solve with a macOS app, but I'm going to start probably with a groceries list kind of app.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, enough. Yeah. Like a list and a bunch of checkboxes. Maybe I want to try to build something to check the billboards in my Mac, so I don't need to go to the web page, which is absolutely there is no advantage whatsoever. But now is instead of the browser is a macOS app.
Yeah.
So it will tell me what billboards are failing, so I can be more desperate as a release manager. But yeah, I don't know. I'm quite excited. It's a different language.
Yeah.
It's a different ecosystem. It's a different everything.
I delved into it a little bit.
Oh, really?
When I had worked for Apple, not in an engineering role. It was like I was a trainer and I did like internal training and team training for like retail and stuff like that. It was fun. I learned a lot and I was working as a repair technician for a while too. That was fun. So I learned how to rip everything apart.
Oh, man, that's super nice.
Remember where all the screws went. It was pretty fun.
All the secret tools.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to learn programming, and it was like I wanted to make stuff for the iPhone. I was like, this looks really cool, and so forth. But if you work for them, they own everything you create, and they were like really adamant, even like retail workers. I'm like, this is kind of lame. So when I left, that was like the first thing I went and did. I'm like, started learning Objective-C, and then Swift came out like right then, when I was like kind of starting to dabble into it. I was like, this is a really interesting language, and it was hard to learn because it was really changing a lot. Like they were structurally changing lots of things. So your code would like completely be modified, which was a little painful, I think, for the early Swift developers. Luckily you could still keep going on the other chains, but it's an interesting language. And
so what is the first thing that you built?
I built something like you said, a checklist
like
kind
a
of thing.
Yes,
yeah, totally.
the checklist.
Yeah, I built it for the phone, and it was kind of fun. And then I did a few games, like little really simple games, and followed some tutorials and stuff. And
nice.
Somebody that Łukasz had mentioned to, the Ray Wunderlich guy, his site is pretty good. Yeah, so it's an interesting language, and definitely. It's intriguing.
Man, I started just a bit. Like, I did one tutorial, but I have to say, I love feeling stupid. Like,
it's interesting.
It's such an interesting feeling. It's like, Jesus Christ, man, I don't understand anything.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? Like, what is this thing? What is this ad here? Like, I love that sensation. Like, Jesus, it's so cool.
One of the complaints people have a lot about Swift itself is like the Apple's own documentation, and I don't know how far you've dug in, but do you feel that like comparatively, or?
I mean, I don't know. It feels okay. There is the feeling right now is that there is a lot of magic, but I suppose I don't know. There is this. There is a bunch of kind of weird. It feels very not too generic and very integrated with Apple. Now you say, I don't know what it was, but like no, it's not property, but it's like add publish. There is an add publish or something that you put in an attribute and something happens. I mean, I assume you can say the same with Python decorators. Yeah, but like at the time I was like, man, it's such an interesting case because I think like, man, I'm sure people feel the same with Python decorators, and I'm not seeing it the same way.
Right.
But I was just playing with that. I said like, Jesus, man, like this feels like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I know I need to put this thing here and it will do something, but and the tutorial guy at the beginning, at that stage of the game, it tells you kind of like, yeah, believe me, you put this, we will cover it, but
just trust us.
Yeah. But I don't know, I love it. Funny. I love it. I really like the sensation of
that's cool,
of like discovering a new world.
Yeah, I think that's a common thing. Like people really like to look at other languages and kind of see what's happening with them, and I mean there's a lot of I guess there's always been an ongoing thing of like the development of languages and borrowing ideas and features, and I think I did the same thing where like I'll look at a language and see these bits that are like, okay, that looks like magic, what is that? And then kind of like dig into it, and that's where I started doing like my tutorials and stuff like that. That's the stuff I want to talk about and try to learn.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Maybe finally I can build something that I can show to my brother, and he says actually, oh, that's cool. Like because a memory profiler
if it's running on the phone
impressive.
Or on the computer,
exactly.
Yeah.
You can check things.
Yeah. So, how can people follow the work that you do?
So I have my Twitter account. I think is the most typical. I tweet a lot about what I'm doing and what we are doing in CPython. It's mostly about Python. So that is PYBLOGSAL. Pablo Gisal. Well, anyway, search Pablo Galindo in Python, Google, and it will appear.
Oh, I'll keep the link.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The magic of editing after the podcast.
Totally.
So exactly. So that is the main way, and I try to be as instructive as possible and don't run. So it's quite friendly. So you want to follow me there? That's the easy way. And I also have this GitHub sponsors page when I sometimes send emails about what I'm doing personally or like what is happening. So if you are generous
cool.
and you want to, I mean, not you, but like any listener as well, but if they want to support me in any way, there will be a way. But in general, if you just want to know what I'm doing, Twitter is the easiest.
All right. Awesome. Well, Pablo, thanks again for coming on the show. It's been fantastic to talk to you.
It's always a pleasure. I'm having such a fun time always. So super happy to be here. And thank you as always.
All right. Thanks. And don't forget, test out Platform.sh for yourself with our free trial available on our website now. Just search Platform.sh in your favorite browser. I want to thank Pablo Galindo Salgado for coming on the show again this week. And I want to thank you for listening to the Real Python podcast. Make sure that you click that follow button in your podcast player. And if you see a subscribe button somewhere, remember that the Real Python podcast is free. If you like the show, please leave us a review. You can find show notes with links to all the topics we spoke about inside your podcast player or at realpython.com/podcast. And while you're there, you can leave us a question or a topic idea. I've been your host, Christopher Bailey, and look forward to talking to you soon.